Welcome, and we are so glad that you're here for another mental health and wellness chat. I'm Brittany, and I'm here with
Madison,
and we're two of your VC Counseling Center counselors.
an associate.
And we're going to have real conversations about the emotional challenges that students face and explore navigating them. So today we're talking about something that every college student can benefit from, right? Our stress toolbox. And this is a question and issue that we get a lot of on campus. How can we manage stress better? So what is a stress toolbox? Think of it like a collection of tools, right? Strategies, habits. These are things that you can turn to when life starts to get overwhelming, as it does. And let's be honest, college life is a lot most of the time. Between classes, work, relationships, just trying to stay healthy, stress can pile up really fast. So today we're going to walk through a handful of go-to tools that we can keep in that toolbox. And the cool thing is that these toolboxes are totally customizable. So what works for one person might not work for another. And that's okay. That's why we're going to go through a menagerie of them with you today and kind of identify maybe what might work for you, what might not work for you, and just kind of talk about stress coping in general, right?
For sure. Let's get into it. Yeah. So it's really important to have more than one coping tool. And you might be wondering why. Because with stress, I think there's different levels of stress that require different coping tools. Sometimes we're at a level 10, sometimes we find ourselves at a level 3, so we might be able to get away with something a little bit more, casual and not so intensive, rather than if we're at a 10, then maybe like distracting might be the best thing. And we'll reroute back to this whenever we've calmed down. So I think just the fact that there's different levels of stress, different experiences that we have from our stress, it makes sense why we need to have a few different options of things we can use.
And I think it varies too with your mood as well. Sometimes I'll get in a mood where I just don't have the patience for a particular coping skill. So it's good to have some variety. Because like Madison said, there are going to be points in life where one coping skill just does not work or it just is not effective. Doesn't mean it doesn't work for you at all. It just means today in this situation, that was not the right coping skill for me. So, okay, I like tools that are low effort, but also high impact because, let's be real, we have very little time. And if we can do something more efficiently with less time or energy, then obviously that's going to be better for most of us in the long run.
For sure.
So you'll hear us talk a lot in general, and it will probably be repeated so many times in all of these things that we do, is that prevention, proactive approaches are something that we advocate for, right? So it's a whole nother monster to try to diffuse stress that has already existed and hasn't been managed for years. This is something that we can work on continuously all the time throughout our life. Even if you're at a point right now listening to this and you're like, I don't really have that much stress in my life. I'm not really overwhelmed. This is the perfect time to start practicing these things, because when we need them, it's good to have them versus trying to, work backwards. So the biggest thing is a preventative self-care routine. Now, every time we say self-care, everyone's brain immediately jumps to expensive things, manicures, massages, or something that costs a lot of money. And it does not have to cost any money.
No.
Everyone's self-care routine is totally different, but it's about finding, I guess the goal of this is nourishing yourself on a daily or weekly basis at a minimum. So that can look like anything, whatever you do that you enjoy simply because you enjoy doing it, that it disconnects you from thoughts, worries, your day-to-day routine. So this can look as simple as binge watching your favorite show on Netflix and unwinding for a few hours every night. It can look like taking a bath instead of a shower if you have a bathtub. It can look like, even if it's just sitting outside in the yard for 30 minutes after you get home to just kind of decompress and downshift. There's a million different ways that this can look, for sure.
Definitely. When I explain self-care, I just say it's any meaningful activity that's going to help bring some calmness and joy into your life. Because so often whenever people do present with stress, which is something that we see really frequently here,
90%.
Yeah, definitely. I think for me, I always try and ask, what do you do for self-care? And so often people don't really have an answer for that. And so it's understandable why their stress is so high, is because they're not taking that time to really care for themselves and fill their cup back up, so to speak. So I love there's so many different options. It can be so individualized to you. It doesn't have to be a long-term activity by any means, because our routine doesn't always allow for us to take 2-3 hours to care for ourselves, unfortunately. So that's why I always stress, start small and build your way up.
And I just had a conversation this week. Another common response that I hear to how are you taking care of yourself is, someone will say, well, I've been wanting to get into blank, whatever it is.
Mhm.
I've been wanting to do this thing, but I haven't had time, I haven't had energy,
Yes.
whatever, whatever. And the thing is, I mean, what better time than now, ultimately?
Right.
At the end of the day, there's never going to be a perfect time
Mhm.
or situation to do some of these things,
Exactly.
especially we tend to shirk our own needs and say, oh, I can take care of that later because other people, other things are more important.
Mhm.
But ultimately, you're what's most important. Your well being is what's most important. And if, joining that knitting group is going to give you some release and disconnect from stress, then absolutely join that group this week.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
So, yeah, another good one even can be obviously within the mental health field, there's a lot of discussion about breathing exercises, grounding techniques. And these can be really good when we, first of all, feel safe enough to practice them, but also whenever we have the time and space and appropriate setting to practice them. And I hear this a lot in our healthcare fields, for example.
Mhm.
They'll come in asking for coping skills for stress or anxiety, and breathing and grounding techniques come up. And the concern is that, well, I can't just stop in the middle of clinical and do a breathing exercise or a
Mm.
guided meditation. I
Yeah,
need something that I can do in the moment that other people aren't going to notice. So that can be
for sure.
one drawback of breathing exercise grounding skills, is that some of them can be a little distracting to everyday life.
Yeah, for sure, and that's a very valid, form of feedback from them because that is so true. If we're in the middle of caring for a patient or doing something intensive that requires our full focus, yeah, we can't just, oh, I gotta go take a few minutes to go
Yeah.
breathe and calm myself down, even though that's so important. It's not always the most realistic thing. But I think that's what's great about breathing and grounding exercises is that there is a wide range of them. Some
Yeah.
are more discreet than others. Like for box breathing, as an example, of course, that's 4 breath, 4 seconds in, a 4 second hold, 4 seconds out, 4 second hold. And you just
Yeah.
repeat that cycle for as long as you need. So I feel like that would be more of a discrete one,
Yeah.
possibly.
And a lot of them can be modified to be a little bit more discreet depending. But, when we talk about breathing exercises, there's so many videos, even on YouTube, where you can go through and get walked through this to kind of see how they work. Same
Yes.
thing with grounding exercises. It's typically either a script, so it's kind of guided meditation-y, or it's like 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, right? Name
Yeah.
5 things you can see, 4 things that you can touch, 3 things that you can smell, and you go through the 5 senses
Hmm.
with it, basically.
Yeah.
But ultimately, the variety in these techniques is limitless. A quick Google search can give you everything that you need to know about a variety and even examples of these skills too. So those can be a
For
really good
sure.
one to look at if you don't already have some of these in your toolbox already.
Yeah, definitely. And another big thing that we like to talk to students about is just recognizing your physical warning signs. Like you said, kind of going back to that preventative approach rather than reactive. Awareness is the first step. Usually people will say, "Oh, I just got stressed so fast. Like, it went from 0 to 100. There was
Yeah.
nothing in between I could have done." And it feels like that. That's so true. But whenever we can actually take a second to kind of sit down and look at things retrospectively, we can see like, oh, actually, I felt like my whole body got a wave of like heat over it, or I felt some tension in my shoulders or my chest.
Yeah.
So looking back, there are those signs that we can pinpoint. And once we're more aware of them, we can start to manage stress more effectively.
Yeah. And even to, on a daily basis, making a habit to kind of check in with yourself and do a self check in. So saying, okay, let me take a breath. What is my stress level right now? And rank
Yes.
it scale of 0 to 10. Okay, it's a 5, let's say. Okay, so what about my physical body? Where is tension? Am I clenching my jaw? Am I clenching my hands? How am I sitting right now? Are my shoulders really tight? Can I relax any muscle in my body right now? And if I can
Hmm.
relax it, that means obviously there's tension there. So it can even be like that too, of just physical check-ins with yourself and stress check-ins to kind of start noticing and making it a habit to monitor, okay, what are my stress levels day to day? And then if they are high, asking yourself, what do I need right now? What
Yeah.
would help me feel more relaxed right now? Even if it's just going and standing outside for 5 minutes, or going and sitting in the air conditioner, or even just taking a time out in the bathroom for 5 minutes
Hmm.
to
Oh,
just
yeah,
kind of decompress, or even drinking water, whatever it looks like, for sure.
definitely.
And obviously, time management and organization skills are a college skill in general, but it's also can be so important with stress management too.
For sure.
Because if I'm, not very good at managing my time and I'm not very organized, this can create more stress in my life that, we could argue if we learn these skills, which are very simple, down to earth skills, then it might alleviate some stress that I don't have to have if I need it,
Absolutely.
So, if you're the type of person that you try to remember all of your appointments in your head, that's adding an unnecessary
Oh,
stress to
yeah.
your life. When if you could just, write them down in your phone calendar, that's one less thing that your brain's trying to
Yes.
juggle 24/7 on a daily basis.
Oh,
So
yeah.
even taking an inventory of our life and saying, where do I struggle with time management? Where do I struggle with organization? Is there something simple that I can do to just make my life easier and streamline it a little bit more?
Yeah. I mean, I know my reminders and my calendar on my phone are my best friend because
Yes.
I cannot do that anymore. Like maybe in the past when I was a little younger, I could, but I'm 25. I'm still young. But
Yeah.
anyway, it's like, yeah, it is really hard to put all that pressure on ourselves to remember. So why not just, get a planner, use your phone. It really makes such a difference.
Yeah.
Because why are we creating stress that we don't need?
And if you haven't found them yet, there's a lot of really good free apps out there for even family scheduling.
Oh,
So, like, for
nice.
example, we use Time Tree, but it's an app that myself, my partner, and my daughter can all share. And so we all share one calendar on there, and you can color code events based off a person. So
Oh,
then I can put my stuff in there, he can put his stuff in there, my daughter can put her stuff in there. And so it can even help keep you organized when you're trying to juggle multiple people in the same family.
wow.
So there's so many resources too these days in terms of
Yeah.
apps and stuff that can just streamline your life so much. It's just a matter of kind of exploring and looking at and seeing what's available and then what would work for me in my life and my circumstances.
Definitely. Another great thing is, like you mentioned earlier, just going out in nature, getting movement.
Mhm.
Obviously, whenever we're out in sunlight, that is really great for relieving stress, just a lot of mental health
Depression,
issues,
yeah, helps
depression.
a
Yeah,
lot.
just getting that vitamin D. A lot of us are inside all day, us included, and we don't have that really access to going outside. So even if it's just 10, 15 minutes of
Yeah.
being out in nature can be huge.
And same thing with movement too. Even
Yes.
if it's taking 2 minutes to stretch, stand up, stretch, do a quick little stretching routine. It doesn't have to be anything fancy. It doesn't have to
Yeah.
be yoga, but just stretching can really help kind of reset your brain, get you out of thought spirals,
Hmm.
detach a little bit from the stress or whatever it is that you're fixated
Yeah.
on.
Reduce tension as well.
Yeah, same thing. I mean, I know a lot of people on campus love the line dancing class, and I think
Oh,
dance is such a
yes.
good expressive way. I have no coordination. You will never see me in that class. It would be so embarrassing. I tried the ballet class. That did not go well in the
Oh,
slightest. I
man.
am not made for coordination, but regardless, movement in some capacity, absolutely beneficial and helpful. And on that same note, creative expression. And I'm going to leave that vague because it's whatever it means to you.
Mhm.
Knitting is creative expression. Even if it's chaos drawing is creative expression. There's so anything can be a creative or artistic expression.
Yeah.
And it's about finding what you like and what works. I've had people that, spray paint art is the thing that they like to make. And it doesn't have to be good either. I get so frustrated having this argument because people will say, well, I really like drawing, but I'm not good at it. Who cares if you're not good at it?
Mhm.
We are not art critics. Even if you decide who you want to show it to, what matters is that you enjoy doing the thing. That's what matters. And that's what
Yeah,
makes it self care. And a
exactly.
coping tool is that it helps you in some way. It doesn't have to be good. That's a self expectation. And it frustrates me because we like handicap ourselves and refuse to do things because we're like, oh, well, it's not going to be good if I do it. Who cares? The assignment is make it a dumpster fire, is what I tell people with that. I want you to make the worst drawing that any mankind has ever seen. And it can help like get rid of that expectation. It's a self expectation that things have to be perfect or I shouldn't be doing them, which artistically.
Yeah, I've definitely used that excuse myself. I am not an artistic person, but I'm working on it. It
She's like, I'm working on
like
it.
you said, I'm trying to get okay with it not looking like a masterpiece. And I think honestly, if I'm getting some kind of enjoyment out of it, some kind of expression out of it, then that's the biggest thing.
Yeah. And then, yeah, sleep hygiene. We'll do a whole separate video on this,
Oh
honestly.
yeah.
It's a lot to unpack, but it's just about looking at, your sleep habits, routines, schedules, and making sure that you're setting yourself up for success when sleeping. Because there's a lot that science has told us that we know helps sleep and inhibits sleep. So just following a set of very simple rules to make sure that you're getting adequate sleep.
Yeah, because obviously we know if we are running off a lack of sleep, that can definitely impact us in many ways.
Oh, yeah.
So sleep hygiene is huge. Yeah.
Absolutely. And so I guess that this is the real question too. And this is just a handful of low effort, high impact coping tools. And a lot of the times you'll hear us say, we need to go back, look at your daily routine and look at where we're working against ourselves, where we're creating stress, where we don't need stress, and then how we're adding fuel back into the tank at the end of the day or week. If your week is that crazy that you can only do it once a week, that's fine. But looking at even just looking at ourselves as a meter, right? Like life, events, work, school take from our bucket. How are we adding into the bucket as things are taking out of the bucket? So, and this is somewhere that therapy, counseling can be really beneficial, is having a place to sit down and take that inventory of, okay, what are some of the things that I do that I create more stress for myself, and how can I add to the bucket? So it can even be like a personalized inventory and assessment of what's working and what's not working.
For sure. And with social media, there's a lot out there. I find myself looking at a lot of different social media creators in regards to like therapy and just self help. And it can get a little overwhelming sometimes. It can kind of feel like there's a pressure to try and do certain coping skills because you see everyone's hyping them up. Everyone's saying, oh, this is working for me. But it's really important to know the difference between what works for you versus what's trending on social media, because that's a huge difference. It's important to recognize your own personalized needs. Like we said, stress is a different experience for everybody. So what works for someone might not work for you, and realizing that that's okay. And just asking yourself, like, what do I need most right now to help me through this experience? And trying out those strategies first.
And that stress meter, sorry, that stress meter that I talked about earlier can be a good way to evaluate coping skills too, to be able to say, if I'm checking in with myself every day and ranking myself 0 to 10, and I'm using a specific coping skill that week. So let's say that week I'm trying to frame things positively, right? So when I am challenged, I make it a conscious effort to not engage negative thoughts and instead reframe them to be more positive. So saying, for example, today was challenging rather than today was awful.
Yeah.
So let's say that's my coping skill for the week. I'm really focused on that. And so every day I check in with myself and my stress is still at a 9 every single day. You might say, okay, maybe this skill isn't quite working for me in the way that I'm doing it. So it can be like, okay, is this something that I need to modify to make it work better? Is this something that I think is just not going to be effective for me? So I want to throw it in the trash and try something different. So just, continuously evaluating what's actually working for you versus just something that someone told you should be doing. So there are different tools for different kinds of stress, right? And we kind of touched on this earlier, given sometimes environment can make tools inappropriate to use. Like, it's relatively inappropriate to try to go through a 20-minute guided meditation in the middle of a clinical rotation.
Yeah.
That's probably not going to work out well for you. And versus, whenever we have academic stress or social stress, maybe things are going on in our relationships, or even just having a bad day, there's going to be different tools that are most appropriate for these situations. And it's important to recognize that coping skills aren't a one size fits all, one situation fits all situation. Sometimes skills are going to work in one area and they're not going to work in another situation. So I guess keeping that mental note to be flexible with skills. And like we said, this is coming back to the topic. This is why we have a toolbox. This is why we keep collecting our rocks in our little toolbox, is to try to figure out, to be able to apply them wherever they need to be and being flexible with it.
Absolutely. Okay. It's also important to point out that there are some tools that people do try, but they don't work long term. Some examples of that could be avoiding our stress. Maybe we're binge watching, maybe we're doom scrolling. These are things that can give us some relief in the short term. But long term, they might be more harmful for us than helpful.
Yeah, skills in moderation. Because like you said, if I'm noticing that, let's say, for example, I need to pay on student loans, but that stresses me out. So I avoid it by avoiding it and maybe binge watching and keeping myself busy and in moderation, right? There's nothing wrong with a short period of time taking a break and doing something different. But it becomes a problem when we're truly avoiding and we're not addressing a problem because, I mean, we could argue by not addressing the problem, we're creating a long-term
Oh,
stress in
yeah.
our life. So sometimes if a problem feels too big to bite, maybe break it into smaller pieces and say, okay, I'm going to
Absolutely.
take this one small step today.
Yeah. There's a difference between, taking a break, like you said, and maybe going on social media, watching a show to give us some kind of feelings of happiness versus I just, sat in bed all day. I didn't do any of my responsibilities. And now I'm feeling even more stressed out than when I started.
Yeah. It's important to note too, we all do that as humans to a
Yes,
degree,
we do.
avoid in unhealthy ways. And, that's okay. Even if we do, that's fine. What matters is what we do next now that we're aware of it and
Yes.
how we like mobilize a plan to move forward and to cope in a healthier way too. And sometimes tools are just not going to work. Like we said earlier, sometimes a coping skill we have always used is suddenly no longer beneficial. So for me, that would be a sign, okay, maybe we need to expand our coping tools and continue growing and use this as a growth point and a growth moment, right?
Yeah, and there's nothing wrong with that. Like we've just been kind of emphasizing this whole video is that sometimes we have to try out different things, see what works best
Yeah.
because what worked for us one day might not work for us the next, and that's all right.
Yeah. And there's a lot of tools already built into campus life too that I feel like sometimes we overlook as students or we're not aware of. Gosh, there's so many. There's obviously counseling. There is the learning lab or the tutoring center if you did need that to cope with class stress
Yeah.
or, Madison, help me out here. What others
I
do we
mean,
got?
I'm sure that there's lots of maybe like groups you can join to promote social connection with one another.
Yeah, like the student life organizations, the different
Yeah,
clubs and
different
stuff.
even events around campus can be helpful for that as well.
There's so many events on campus. If you have not found the new campus calendar, I cannot overstate to you guys how revolutionary this calendar has been for VC staff and employees. We are so excited about it, probably more excited than anyone would ever be excited about it. But if you have not found this yet, it lists every event. You can filter by the type of event or whether or not there's food at the event. So definitely utilize that resource. If you just go to the VC homepage and you click, I think it's something like calendar up at the top, it'll take you over there. And yeah, there's a wellness program
Yeah.
too with, weight training, yoga, all of it's free. You just, you lose your time. You just have to show up and do it. And it's not a class or anything. It's just kind of a group of people get together and do whatever that thing is, line dancing, yoga, whatever it might be. So yeah, there's a lot of things built into campus life that you have access to. So looking at that even and seeing, okay, what could some of these things be part of my self-care or stress management routine? And where could I fit them in or work through this or use some of these resources too, even?
Absolutely. Another great thing to kind of touch on is how do we find a balance of using peer support without over relying on our friends?
And the reason that we bring this up though is because I I love to yap. That is being a counselor. Most of the time we sit silently, right? And this is why I think we like the podcast so much is because it's the one time we get to yap in an 8-hour period at work.
Yeah.
Because most of our day is spent not talking excessively. I love to yap. And a lot of the times, even throughout my life, even we love to vent as humans.
Yes,
Just,
absolutely.
vent, complain, unload on people around us, not in a therapy way, but kind of just in a, word vomit. This is everything that's going on. I'm overwhelmed. Let me get this out. Right.
Yeah.
And while that feels pretty good sometimes, there is a difference between venting and processing things.
Yes, absolutely.
With processing, it's what we do in therapy, right? We're exploring the issue, the situation, the stressor. We're talking it through. We're looking at coming up with a plan to cope with this in a healthy way. When we're venting, we're kind of just a situation all over. And so I think that is the question is, there's nothing wrong with venting to friends and family about what we're going through. We're going to do that. But how do we avoid making that our primary method of coping? Because I feel like I've seen a lot of people that is the only way that they cope is by venting and unloading on people. And sometimes it can hurt our relationships too, because,
yes,
maybe it's stressful to be on the receiving end of that.
Definitely.
And so maybe if every time I talk to you, all that we do is vent, then that can be a stressful situation. And maybe I avoid talking to you as much because I'm going through something in my life, and like what you're going through is too much for me right now, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that could absolutely start to have an effect on the relationship. I was thinking the same thing. You know how whenever we have a partner or friend who's going through something stressful or something sad, those feelings kind of rub off on us. And like
Yeah.
you said, that can have a really big impact on how we're feeling as well. That might even increase our stress. So it's definitely important to, like we said, it's of course normal to talk to your friends every now and then whenever you're feeling stressed, but to also have a balance of other things that you're doing to, promote that stress management.
Take care of yourself and actually cope with things too.
Yes.
So once again, we always circle back, everything in moderation, right? There's nothing wrong with
Yes.
doing something so long as it's in moderation most of the time. And there are differences between tools that there's a big difference between the tools we're going over today and tools that we would use in a crisis, right? Because these are mostly tools to maintain or establish general well-being.
Yeah.
Whereas a crisis coping skill is so much different. And if you feel like you're in crisis or you struggle with frequent crisis, I would strongly recommend exploring professional therapy intervention in that way, because I feel like crisis planning, crisis coping is so personalized and very important, obviously, because we want to get through that crisis in the healthiest way possible.
Yeah.
So just touching on that, I want to make sure we touched on that for a second, of saying explicitly, like, if you feel like crisis is significant for you and a problem in your life, for me, that would be a line of, okay, let's definitely explore professional counseling, then come into the counseling center for, your free counseling sessions here on campus.
Yeah, absolutely. I know, like we were kind of talking about in a previous episode, there's a difference between whenever stress is so high, we kind of need to engage in that distraction or something temporary so that we don't escalate things
Yeah.
versus, kind of those more preventative things like self-care, getting, good amounts of sleep, eating healthy, things like that. So it is a really big differentiation between the two.
I thought another fun thing that we could do here today is kind of talk about, for us as individuals, obviously we went to counseling school, got our master's degree. Part of that is learning different coping. We talked about this before, accumulating a lot of different coping skills, just general knowledge of them to be able to provide those skills to other people, right? So even if there are lots of skills that I hate and do not work for me and make me uncomfortable, but for other people, they work very, very well. So we can each do this right now. So Madison,
Yes.
tell me a coping tool that surprised you. So either because you loved it or you hated it. Give me some coping skills that you have that really surprised you, positive or negative.
Yeah, so I have two, both I would say are positive. One is using cold water. I think cold water can be really helpful in moments of crisis. I'm someone who I hate a cold shower. Like even
Yes.
washing my face in the morning, I would hate cold water because it's just cold. But it really can be so helpful for kind of snapping us out of what we're going through. It's
Yeah.
honestly like a good factory reset for our brain and
is,
our
yeah.
body whenever we're using cold water, whether that's just splashing your face with some water, putting some ice packs on your face or on different areas of your body, taking a cold shower.
Holding an ice cube. Yeah.
Yes, holding an ice cube in your hand. It's amazing. It can actually lower your heart rate. It can be a good distraction from the emotions and feelings that we're experiencing and our thoughts as well. So yeah, I honestly, that's something that's really surprising to me just because I was so against it for a really long time.
And every time that I explain this coping skill to clients or students, every single time people look at me like I'm crazy. And they're like, okay, so you're telling me when I feel overwhelmed, you want me to hold an ice cube.
Yeah.
And when I put it that way, it does sound really
It does.
ridiculous. And I always tell them, just bear with me and trust me. Do you
Yes.
trust me? Just give it a shot and see. And yeah, it does. It has to do with their nervous system and resetting and, shifting into the opposite nervous system, autonomic versus sympathetic. And it's a somatic skill. It does work within our body physically to create a reaction, an opposite reaction, basically. They use it in the medical field too. It's legit.
Yeah.
But it does sound very bizarre on the surface. Yeah, I'll give you that.
And then I guess another one is just this idea of shaking, like just shaking it out. And that's because when I think of stress, I think it's just a good part of it is it's excess energy within our body that we need to remove and get out of it. I think a cool kind of story is animals, whenever they go through some kind of stressful or traumatic experience, after it's over, they're actually shaking. You can
Mm-hmm.
see that they're shaking or like kind of having tremors, and that's their way of relieving that excess stress that they're feeling. But as humans, we don't really do that, right? We keep
Yeah.
jumping from one thing to the next. We don't take that time to kind of regulate. So a good way to kind of take a page out of the book of an animal, I guess, is to just shake, like just put on a song that you like and just like have a little mini dance party, like for
Love
just
that.
like 2-3 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
It's not a hard thing to do, and just a shimmy a day keeps like the depression away. It's
Mm-hmm.
like depression's harder to hit a moving target. That's the funniest thing to me,
I
but it's
love
like,
that.
yeah, that's so true. Just shake it out,
Yeah, I love
shake
that.
it
You
off.
picked the two weirdest coping skills, by
Thank
the
you, I
way.
tried.
And I mean, I do. I hear it. I have another one that I sometimes tell students about, it's called a wet noodle meditation. It's not a meditation, but
Oh.
basically what you do is you sit and you take a breath, you imagine your entire, like all the muscles in your body is a wet noodle, and then you shake it out like you're shaking wet. This is so weird. It's weird to even describe. I have had people that worked really well for them, is all that I'm saying. So everyone is different, and this speaks to that. So yeah, on your point. My two biggest ones, guided meditation. So for me personally, I do not have the attention span to visualize a mountain and go through all of, like,
Yeah.
I don't. I get distracted. I still think anyway. So that one was surprising for me, because I feel like there's so much in pop culture about how beneficial and helpful guided meditation is.
Mhm.
And bless the counselor that tried to walk me through this at 15, because
Oh
I
my
was not
gosh.
having it.
Yeah.
You know who you are if you're listening to this, and I am so sorry for the things that I did. But no, and one thing that has surprised me, I I do enjoy exercise for most of my life, but one thing I've been doing over the last year is running obscene distances. But that really has been a really healthy coping outlet mechanism for
Yeah,
me.
for sure.
Getting outside, moving your body in a
Mhm.
structured way, and
Yes.
then, obviously, like the mental grit and aspect of everything has been really, really beneficial. So, and I've been a person my entire life, I hated running. I don't want to run. I still hate it. 90% of days I still hate running. But it has helped so much being consistent with that and doing it every day. I feel like it's one of the greatest things throughout my lifetime that I found that manages my stress in such a significant proactive way, I guess.
Yeah,
So even if it's something that you hate, maybe it might turn into something that is, the thing that helps you manage stress the most effective way that you've ever found, for sure.
absolutely. I love that example.
So, okay,
Yes.
Madison, what would we say to students who come in and they say, nothing I try actually helps?
I think a good question is, how long have you given it a try?
Yeah, fair.
Are you being consistent with it? Because so
Mm,
often we wait until, I'm guilty of this myself, we wait until we are in the highest stress possible.
yeah.
And of course, it's going to be hard to utilize that coping skill effectively.
Hmm.
So I always try to emphasize we have to start practicing these whenever we're feeling calm and regulated.
Yeah.
And that way we can access it more easily whenever we are in that really high stress period. But
Yeah.
yeah, and I think sometimes people expect it to be a really quick fix. And like that would be amazing if we could fix something in a matter of days or a week. But it
Yeah.
does take time, and it's just learning to be patient with it rather than be so quick to kind of give up on it,
Well, and
I
this goes
guess.
back to even to the coping with difficult emotions episode
Yes.
that we did too, of, there's this discomfort in feeling a negative emotion.
Hmm.
So we don't want to feel it. So we want to escape it. We want it to end quickly, and we don't want to feel it again. When in
Yeah.
reality, sometimes these things stick for a reason, and
Yeah.
sometimes they need to be explored a little bit deeper, which is where therapy can be really beneficial. And even looking at too, if we're focused on the wrong problem with what
Oh,
we're trying to do. So
yeah.
looking at, is this actually the issue? Or
Hmm.
am I getting distracted by something that's not the real issue
That's a good
here?
point
If
for
that makes
sure.
sense.
Yeah.
So another thing to consider in these discussions is check-ins, like we talked about earlier, right? So check-in, and it's even important as we go through and we take an inventory of our coping skills in general, looking at your toolbox and saying, okay, do I need to update this? What has been working? How have I been coping lately? And then the question is how often we should be doing this too. Ideally, in a perfect world, once a week, minimum once a month, of just kind of checking in. And this is what it means to be proactive about wellness. It's not something that I only take an inventory of when things are awful. It's something that I try to make a conscious effort and prioritize myself and my well-being and say, okay, this is going to be a part of my routine. I am going to check in with myself once a week or once a month and see emotionally, where have I been at the last month? Stress-wise, where have I been at? And a lot of the times we can identify, you know, the common one I hear is, I've just been getting headaches constantly and my stomach has been hurting and all of these different physical symptoms, right? And then if we sit down and take an inventory, a lot of the times it's, well, I have been really stressed. I do have, 10 stressors in my life right
Yeah.
now, and I have been 10 out of 10 most days. Well, then that kind of starts to make sense when we look at the whole picture and take an inventory in that way.
Yeah, for sure. Sometimes it's easier to recognize the physical sensations rather than the emotional,
Yeah.
experiences that we're going through. So that's a really good point.
Yeah, your body will tell you a lot of times before your brain even
Absolutely.
tells you.
Yes.
So we do have a challenge for you. I would like for you listening to this right now to try a new coping strategy this week. Bonus points if it's something that's kind of weird, like the ice cube thing or the wet noodle thing, or bonus points for that. But try something different this week for 7 days and see how you feel about it. At the end of the week, reevaluate, ask yourself, okay, was that awful or did it help? And if it did help, what percent did it help? Was it only 20%, 50%? This can kind of help you get a pulse of if you want to continue it, if it's helpful for you, or if it's something you kind of just want to throw in the trash for you, you know?
Yeah, for sure. Just got to start somewhere and see where it takes you.
Yeah.
Listening out there, which we hope you are loving the podcast, is we encourage you to send us an email, share your favorite stress tools for future episodes.
Yeah, and you can find my email. So if you Google Victoria College Counseling, it'll pull up our webpage, and my email's right there on the website. So jump in there, yeah, shoot us an email, let us know, and then we can do future episode updates and go over some of the coping skills. If you feel like there's some that we missed, or you feel like a lot of people might benefit from that, or you just want us to talk it out, process it, look at it, we can absolutely do that. Just shoot me an email and let me know.
Yeah. And we do want to just briefly take a moment to remind you that this is not a replacement for therapy in any way. This is just educational purposes, just having, a good conversation about mental health tools to hopefully help you get a better idea of, what this might look like for you and how we can work towards improving things.
Yeah.
So thank you so much for joining us today in your go-to space for honest conversations about mental health and well-being. We're your hosts, Madison
And Brittany.
And we're glad that you spent part of your day with us. Remember that taking care of your mind is just as important as taking care of your body. Make sure that you're kind to yourself, reach out if you need support, and know that you're never alone. Until next time, take care and take a deep breath.